Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Every week, photographers meet here to connect, inspire, and create with the help of a guest speaker who shares their stories behind their photographs, and they offer tips to inspire us to try something new. You can find the schedule on my website at lindanickell.com/happiness hour. And while you're there, please consider signing up for our monthly newsletter. Tonight's guest is Brandon Black. Brandon is a landscape and nightscape photographer based in Alabama, whose work captures the beauty of the natural world, both under the sun and among the stars. With a style that blends technical precision and artistic vision, Brandon creates images that evoke wonder, stillness, and a sense of scale. Whether he's chasing stormlight, across rugged terrain, or patiently waiting beneath a dark sky to capture the Milky Way. Brandon brings a deep appreciation for nature and the cosmos to every frame. In his presentation, An Evening Under the Stars, Brandon will share a practical and inspiring introduction to digital astrophotography. He'll touch on essential gear and techniques to advance tips like blue hour blending, image stacking, and star tracking. Whether you're curious about capturing the Milky Way or ready to level up your night photography, this talk will guide you through the tools, planning, and creative possibilities of shooting the night sky. You can connect with Brandon through his website at blacklion.photography. And if you're on Instagram, you can find him at blacklion_photography_. And I'll link those in the show notes. So with that, welcome to the Happiness Hour, Brandon. I am thrilled to have you here.
I
So
really appreciate the invite.
yeah, okay. So I tend to do my little intros based on what I want to say. What did we miss? Take the opportunity to fill in the gaps and uh you know I don't, well, I'm like blanking because I'm pretty sure I covered it all. But if I missed
You
some,
did.
please take the opportunity to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Like Linda said, I'm a landscape and nightscape photographer. I've been on this journey of full time doing this since about 2016 is when I really, delved into it. Um, for as long as I can remember, I've always carried a camera around with me in my adult life, taking photographs on vacation, at the beach, wherever I might be, but never actually did anything with those images. And about early 2016, a friend of mine would ask me if I wanted to go shoot astrophotography up at the Chandler Rock. And I'd never done it before. And my ancient equipment from like 2002, some Canon Rebel or something, uh, no knock against those Canon people, but wasn't up to the task, and neither were my lenses. So I sold them all off and purchased my first Sony camera and just bought an entry level mirrorless Sony camera. And we went out and shot. And I remember that first night under the stars, seeing it and then photographing it on the back of my camera, just in complete awe. And from that moment, I've been hooked. And it started an obsession that's led me down to where we are now. And yeah, so it's been a fun journey, and here we are.
Okay. Well, I think I told you there's all different levels of people in here.
Yeah.
So I know you're going to cover mostly basics, I think, tonight, but I'm not concerned because there's always something that we can learn and something that I don't think I've ever heard that before. So um, I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad to have this as part of our Happiness Hour project presentation. So thank you for giving up your time. I know you are traveling for work right now, so there's all kinds of,
There's
logistics and stress, but I appreciate that you.
it's all good. I'm excited to be here, so thank you.
Well, thank you for saying yes to the invitation. So, all right, with
Absolutely.
that, I'm gonna let you have the screen.
Okay. I will, like Linda said, this is an evening under the stars of blackline photography. Um, we're gonna go through some of the basics, talk about some of the apps I use, planning of shots, composition thoughts, techniques, editing techniques. It's kind of the whole gamut of front to back here of astrophotography and how we go about capturing that. So without further ado, we already talked about who I am and how I got here, um, but the why of astrophotography. And it's, I mean, Mike and Frankie, who are in this talk tonight, they were out there last week and we talked about this, and that every time I go out under the stars, it's that same sense of awe, the feeling of being a tiny speck in this whole world, galaxy, everything, the universe. And it's just so cool to see it every time I go out there, and I get excited to do it. And so it keeps bringing me back over and over again. And it is a really, really fun time, and I enjoy it. So um, tonight, it's not going to be overly technical or intimidating. This is about just getting you the basics of understanding what all goes into night photography, some of the techniques to use in the field, pardon me, some of the techniques to use in the field, as well as techniques to use in editing. And we'll kind of cover all that, equipment to use, etc. And if you have questions throughout this, please do not hesitate to ask. Linda, jump in whenever. You're not going to break my flow. I'm more than happy to stop and answer those questions as we go along here.
Okay, thank you.
So tonight, kind of what we're going to cover is what can you photograph? What in the night sky is considered astrophotography, and what are some things that you can photograph out there? The gear that you might use for this, whether it be cameras, lenses, um, other accessories, the different techniques that I use for shooting, some of the basic settings and functions of the camera that we want to set when we're out doing night photography. How are we going to focus while we're out there doing it? That's usually one of the biggest questions that people have, is how do you focus in the dark, right? And so we can talk about that. Alignment, movement, that kind of deals with, the time of the year, the Milky Way season that's out there, and how it moves across the sky when we're stacking, tracking, etc. Apps I like to use that kind of help me plan my shot and also help me when I'm on location. And then where do you go? Where can you go to find some nice dark skies? And how do we find out where those places are? So just a few photographs here. Obviously Milky Way, my primary focus is Milky Way photography. That's what I'm really passionate about. I've dabbled in moon photography. You can see some shots from the solar eclipse last year or this past year. But star trails, deep space, anything that's got night landscapes with celestial backdrops, you can combine those images into Photoshop or in part of your editing process. But like Andy and we're talking about, going out shooting constellations, Orion, the Big Dipper, whatever the case is. All those things are potential topics or things that you can photograph in the night sky. So, and we talked about this and just some of the appeal of astrophotography. And, one of the big things is the connection to something bigger. You're standing out there in the night sky. It is truly a humbling experience. Just to be able to sit there and see it arching across the sky. And I mean, we talked about it last week, and that it almost looks like you're looking at static on a TV if you're in a really dark sky location. And Big Bend in West Texas, if you've never been, is the darkest skies in the lower 48 states. And it does look like you're looking at static on a TV. There's the vastness of the sky and how many stars are actually out there. It is almost overwhelming. But then as a photographer, you're revealing the invisible to most people. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many people have never seen the Milky Way and have never seen the night sky. Like we get to see it when we go out to these dark sky locations. And so taking that photograph and bringing some of that awe and that wonder to the general public and just being able to share it with them is something I enjoy doing. And as you can see in the image here, like my style of photography, if you've never seen it, is it's a little artistic, and I take a little bit of artistic liberties with my colors and bring those out and highlight them and try to make it pop, for better lack of a better word. But that's part of my art, and part of revealing the invisible to people is being able to show them something that they can't see, and it's really cool. But then the challenge behind it, like, it's not as simple as just going out to a sunset location and pressing the trigger. There's a lot of planning through apps. Where can I go shoot the dark sky? B, what time of year am I out there? What's the weather? Does the Milky Way line up with my foreground element? As photographers, we look to tell a story. And so as you take a photograph, there's a rule of thirds, you're looking for leading lines, the S curve, whatever it is, the same thing applies to your night photography in that you want to tell a story and have a visual image. And it's like this image here on the left, you're seeing that road, the leading lines leading down into the San Juan Mountains, up into the Milky Way. So you're bringing that viewer into the story. And so there's a lot of art and work that goes behind creating these Milky Way images. At least that's the way I see it, and that's the way I try and teach it. Um, and then there's just the thrill of the chase. I mean, I love going to new locations, old locations for that matter. Any chance I get to get out and shoot the night sky with some really cool foregrounds. I'm all about it. And so I love it. I mean, I love photography, but astrophotography, capturing the Milky Way is my true passion. And yeah, I'll take every opportunity to go out and do that. And so that's part of my why and the appeal behind astrophotography for people. So camera gear, uh, and this applies primarily to digital cameras, but any DSLR mirrorless that has the ability to utilize manual functions, manual settings is great. Full frame sensors are preferred, just they do a little bit better in low light. And so that's recommendation. But I started out using crop sensor cameras and they did just fine. So for your beginners to your amateurs, even your more experienced, my backup is still a crop sensor camera, and it does a great job. So nothing against them, but ideally a full frame camera. And then lenses, you want a fast aperture. Ideally, you want 2.8 or faster. So your 1.8, your 1.4s, your 1.2. That's really what we're looking for in terms of lenses. If you're in a dark sky location, you can get away with a 3.5 or an f4. Um, just need to do a little bit longer exposure, but it is highly doable. And then focal length wise, anywhere in that 12 to 36 is going to be an ideal range for you. So 12, obviously, you can get a lot more of the sky in there. You get a lot more of your foreground. And then the farther you zoom in there to that 36 millimeter, you can actually get some really nice big skies and get some of that compression in your foreground and really tell a story, which is kind of cool. Tripods are a must. If you're doing night sky photography, you got to have a stable, sturdy tripod. You don't want a flimsy one that can get blown around the wind. Any little bit of camera shake is really going to be problematic uh, for the for shooting. So just be mindful of that. Tripod, definitely worth having a very good tripod, and that will definitely help you out there. So remote shutter, this is another useful one. If you have a remote shutter, uh, using that intervalometer, the wireless remotes is going to be a useful tool. You can also get away with a timer. If you have a timer available on your camera as a 2-second or a 5-second, that is in most cases sufficient to prevent camera shake. But if not, intervalometers are a great tool to have, and they're usually fairly inexpensive and pretty generic for across camera brands. So lenses, there's pros and cons to both zoom and prime, but anything wide angle, like I said, 12 to 36, at 14 to 35, that's usually the sweet spot, so to speak, for most manufacturers. Um, Again, 2.8 or wider, better for light gathering, allow short exposures, lower ISO if you need to. Um, the prime versus zoom, primes are usually sharper, usually faster as overall, so to speak. But the zooms offer you a little more flexibility if you want to do some focal length blending. If you shoot your foreground real wide and you want a little bit bigger sky, you can zoom in and do some focal length blending. And we can talk about that here in a little bit, but there's pros and cons to both. Just some quick recommended ones, and this is speaking from my personal experience. If you're looking for budget friendly, Rokinon makes some really good lenses. You might have to try a couple different versions of the same lens depending on what gets shipped to you. But for budget purposes, that 12 millimeter 2.8 is a really good manual lens. I currently use the Sigma 14 to 24 2.8 Art Series. It's a good lens for the price. I'm a Sony shooter, but Sony glass, if you're not familiar, is quite expensive. And so I use Sigma for two of my three lenses. And then that Sony 24 millimeter prime 1.4 is a really nice lens, as well as that 16 to 35 2.8. So anything in that ballpark is going to do a really good job for you. And I know Nikon and Canon have their lens lines that follow within those parameters. So they'll be really good for you. So camera setup, and this is all setting up your camera before you even go out into the field, before you get out into the night. But you want to make sure you're shooting in raw format. Obviously, most of us are shooting that in that capacity, but that's going to give you the most editing potential on the back end. Um, and when you're shooting Milky Way, there's a lot more editing that goes into the back end, that post processing part of it, than most normal landscape, sunset, sunrise photography. The other thing what I recommend is turning off your long exposure noise reduction within your camera, as well as the high ISO noise reduction. Um, Both those actually counteract what we're looking to do in night photography. And so if you're not familiar, that long exposure noise reduction is essentially taking a dark frame of your initial shot. So if my shot is 10 seconds long, that long exposure noise reduction is going to be a 10-second dark screen, the same length. So if I'm out shooting and I'm trying to take multiple shots back to back, um, I'm having to wait that double the time of my exposure. So instead of waiting 10 seconds to take my next shot, I'm waiting 20 seconds to take the next shot. And so there's some limitations there. And with the current lens cameras and lens setup and the post processing that's available to us, that long exposure noise reduction is not needed. And the same thing goes for the high ISO noise reduction. You really don't need that when you're shooting Milky Way photography. Always want to shoot in manual mode. When you're out shooting, you want to control all three parameters, whether it be ISO, your shutter speed, or your f-stop, where you control all of that while we're out shooting. So nothing's left in aperture, no shooting priority, obviously no auto settings. Everything's manual mode. And we're going to manual focus. Um, and the easiest way to do that in night photography is you find a bright star in the sky, and using your zoom function on your live view, you zoom into that bright star and then you manual focus so that star is a pinpoint dot. Um, I know with the Sonys, we have the ability to do the manual focus enhancement where you can change the color. So when something's in focus, I use red. It's just easy to see at night. But you can use red, and basically anything that's in focus will highlight with a red ring around it. And so when you're shooting stars, you're looking for that red pinpoint dot, and that's when I know my stars are in focus. So always manual focus. Another way of focusing at night would, if you have a light that's really far off in the distance, you could actually zoom in on that light and use it. And it's far enough away that your camera's going to think it's infinity, and it'll work for star photography. So either one of those two options work for you. Um, if your camera or lens has stabilization built into it, turn it off. When you're on a tripod, everything is sturdy and stabilized. So when you leave the stabilization on your lens, there's some weird thing that happens where it thinks it's not stabilized and tries to stabilize, which then actually creates shake and causes issues with your focusing and your long exposure. So if you're shooting night photography, just turn off the stabilization in body camera as well as on the lens if you have both. Um, this white balance change in camera, there some people are all about changing their white balance within camera when they're out shooting. So they'll change their Kelvin settings down to about 3300 to 3500. You don't have to. I teach it both ways. I more often than not will change my settings in post processing as opposed to out in the field, unless I'm getting some wonky colors in the back of my screen with auto white balance in field. If I'm seeing some weird browns and a lot of warm tones to it, then I will switch my Kelvins to a little bit cooler temperature, just to get a more natural look to it. And then remove long camera straps. Some people shoot with them, some don't, but they will introduce camera shake. And so, especially on a windy evening, as we all know, any little bit of shake is going to cause issues in focusing. So, while it's important in regular landscape photography, it's ultra important in night sky photography because of the long exposures. We want to remove anything that's going to introduce any possible camera shake, which is why a sturdy tripod that isn't really affected by the wind or any vibrations is key there. So camera settings, these are pretty basic starting points here. And they're good places no matter what you're shooting with, whether it be a crop sensor or full frame. You want to be wide open as possible with your lens. If you can go 2.8, great. If you can go a little bit wider to a 1.8 or a 1.4, I recommend starting there. And I make this note about you may need to stop down based on lens performance. And what I mean by that is if you take a shot and then you zoom in and look at your corners with your lens, if you're starting to see some coma or aberrations, or if your stars start to look a little warpy, like they're getting pulled and stretched in the corners, if you stop that lens down, for instance, if you're shooting at 1.4 and you're noticing that in the corners, if you stop down to a 2.8, it should eliminate any of that you're seeing. If you're shooting at 2.8, you can stop down to 3.2 or 3.5. But again, all that's going to be dictated upon where you photographing the night sky. If you're in Big Bend, you can easily get away with stopping down to a 3.2. If you're in a Bortle class 4, you probably won't get away with that. You're just going to have to leave it wide open at 2.8 just for the light collection. Um, and we can talk about that dark sky if you're not familiar with the Bortle here shortly. I got a slide on that. So ISO, good starting point. I tell most people is anywhere from 3,200 to 6,400 if you're in a dark sky location. If you have some light pollution in the area nearby, I'd probably bring that back down to like a 2,500 to 1,600. But a general good starting point is 3,200 to 6,400. And if you look at the pictures here on the left, you'll notice that I'm actually shooting way higher my ISO. Sonny's do a really good job shooting 8,000 or 10,000 without much noise. And the noise that is there, I'm able to get rid of through stacking or tracking. So um, I'll shoot wide open 2.8, 8 to 10,000 ISO. But again, it's all dictated upon where you're actually photographing the night sky. Shutter speed wise, a good starting point for most people is going to be in that 20 to 30-second range. Um, if you're looking to avoid star trailing, I'd say 10 to 15 seconds is probably a good spot for you. We'll do some math here in a little while. We'll talk about the rule of 500 and the rule of 400 if you're not familiar, but that gives you a starting point for most lens combinations, focal length combinations. I'm OCD about it. I talked about when I first started how in all I was my first image with a single exposure. And the more I got into this, the more I started noticing the noise and the star trailing with a longer exposure, and it drove me nuts. And so I started shooting shorter exposures at higher ISOs to avoid the star trailing. So for me, my lens setup, I know I cannot shoot any more than 15 seconds before I start getting star trailing. More often than not, I'm around 10 seconds. So, and as we talked about, a lot of this is dependent on light pollution, ambient light in the area, and your desired look. Um, I know plenty of really good photographers that shoot at much lower ISOs or different shutter speeds, and they get really great results. Again, this is all just a starting point. And then from what your actual end goal is, you kind of fluctuate those numbers a little bit. So if you've never shot the Milky Way or you haven't really, you're not familiar, there is actually a season, quote unquote, for the core of the Milky Way. And on the screen is an image here. And the core is what's referred to as that center part there that looks like a dark horse nebula, or it looks like a horse on its side. You see the legs with the head up at the top. That is what's known as the core of the Milky Way. And so there is a season. Generally, it's February through October. Um, Depending upon the year, it can be early to late February, and then late October, sometimes in early November, you might get a little glimpse of it, but it all depended upon the year. Um, so early season Milky Way, you're going to see it in the southeastern sky really early in the morning. It's not sleep friendly if you want to go out and photograph the Milky Way early in the season. You're usually up around 2, 3 a.m. You're going out to wherever you're going to go shoot, and you're there through sunrise. But it's going to be a lot more parallel to the horizon. So February, March, it's really comes off as quite flat, low in that southeastern horizon, early in the morning, right before sunrise. And then with each passing month, you start to see more and more of the Milky Way, and the core gradually becomes more and more vertical as the months go on. So just came back last week, and early in the evening, you're getting a decent arch, and then as the night progresses, becomes more and more vertical. So about 1:30 in the morning, you're getting almost a straight up and down. And so um, as the year progresses, the core moves across the southern sky, and then by October, November, you're looking at southwestern sky. And right after sunset, it's either vertical or past vertical already. And again, that's all dependent upon which year. Does it, the new moon cycle fall in the beginning of the month, middle of the month, end of the month? All that's going to be dictated by that. So I mentioned before the class 4 Bortle skies. You can see the Bortle scale here if you're not familiar, haven't seen this before, but one is actually, obviously the excellent dark sky sites. That's your Big Bend National Park. There's a few others around the world. But ideally anything of four or less, four or lower is where you want to be to photograph the night sky. And that's where you're going to have your best opportunity. I was actually pretty surprised. I was out photographing in North Alabama, a couple hours east of Huntsville, and we had some class fours looking out into the dark skies a little bit and was able to capture some pretty decent Milky Way. So that made me pretty happy considering I've been, living here for a few years now and hadn't really gotten out to shoot the Milky Way around Huntsville. And so now that I know I have a 2 hours away, I can go shoot the Milky Way. I'm pretty excited. Um, so yeah, so there's 9 levels. Your city lights obviously are going to be really bright and detrimental to viewing any stars whatsoever. And obviously, the farther you get from the cities, the better off you're going to be. But 4, 3, 2, 1, any of those areas, you'll be pretty set with photographing some stars. So planning your shoot, uh, there's a few apps that I use quite frequently, and there's a few others I recommend. The biggest one that I use on a day-to-day would be PhotoPills. Uh, it's a paid app. I think it's 9.99, but it's really good at picking a location. You can see sunrise, sunset. You can see when blue hour is going to be. You'll see when the Milky Way rises, the times that the Milky Way will be visible to you. When's the moon going to rise and affect my shot? Uh, as you can see down here in this picture, you can change your focal length so you can see what a 13 millimeter would look like versus like a 23 millimeter. And it gives you a way, especially if you're on location, to see I'm going to stand right here to photograph the Milky Way. When does it come across my foreground subject? And in the top left corner, you'll see the time. So I know at 10:25 p.m. on this date when I was there, the Milky Way is going to be right there. Um, and it does a pretty good job of being on point GPS location wise. You might have some slight discrepancies, but for the most part, it does a really good job of that. So I use PhotoPills all the time to plan my shots when I'm on location. And because I do a lot of blue hour blending, I screenshot all of these like this. This is actually a screenshot I took from this location. It's a Milky Way shot that I've yet to edit from last summer, but that's my recommendation is whenever you're doing this with some of the techniques I'm going to talk about here shortly is take a screenshot from that location so you have it for reference later. Um, Planet Pro is another really good app. It's paid as well. Um, what I like about Planet Pro that PhotoPills does not have is the ability to show a 3D version of a location without having to be there. So you can actually scroll through your timeline and see when the Milky Way will actually be over your subject. Um, PhotoPills, you actually have to be on location looking through the virtual reality to see what you see there on the right. So Planet Pro has that same feature, but they also have that 3D version. So you do not have to be there if you know you're going to uh, let's say I know I'm going to Big Bend National Park next year on a specific date during the new moon cycle, I can move my calendars to that specific date at that specific time for whatever location I plan on shooting. And it will show me a 3D rendering of when the Milky Way is coming across the sky. So I know if, hey, that mountain's in my way, I won't see the Milky Way core. I can adjust my position. So that is a neat feature of Planet Pro. Another one I use a lot when on location is this Clear Outside app, which is the bottom screenshot you see there. And that one's just nice because it shows you cloud coverage, predicted cloud coverage over the course of a couple of days. And so you can see total cloud coverage, low cloud, medium clouds, and high clouds. Um, Obviously, if there's a lot of low clouds, you're not going to be photographing anything in the night sky. It's just going to be too overcast. But sometimes with the higher cloud coverage, if it's not completely socked in, you can actually get some pockets where you can actually see the Milky Way. And so it's just another tool that helps you plan for your shoots. Whether obviously you need clear skies, so that plays a major role. So we all joked about it that I think we all have 3, 4, 5 different weather apps that we will cross-reference and see who's predicting what and what's the weather going to be and how many clouds are we going to have and this is just one of them. Um, Another good app is all these do the same thing, but your Sky View, Skywalk, and Sky Guide. They all do a really good job of just showing you different objects in the night sky, whether it be constellations, major stars, planets. One of them actually shows you the Milky Way where it's going to be. And so it's just a good reference tool while you're out to kind of see, identify objects in the sky if you're not familiar already. And so those are just a few of the different apps that we utilize. Like I said, any weather app you can pull up, they all usually will give you some variation of the weather. So it's just we get a little OCD and anal about making sure that the weather is going to be what it's going to be while you're, where you're out photographing. And yeah, so there's tons of apps out there, but these are the main ones that I use. Best time to shoot Milky Way, if I haven't talked about this, is around new moon. So uh, new moon, there's no moon in the sky, you just don't see it, and so there's no light pollution from the moon, and so it's the best time to capture the Milky Way. Obviously, full moon is going to wash out your sky. It's very bright, very close to us, so you're not going to see the Milky Way. You can get away. Usually, the new moon obviously falls on one specific date, but usually a few days after and several days before, you can still get out and capture the Milky Way without having any moon interference. So these apps will show you the moon cycle when it's visible. The really cool thing about photopills is that when you're looking at the certain date, there's actually a slider on the top of the app that will be up here where it says night AR right now, but it will actually show you uh, the quality of visible Milky Way core. So closer to new moon or right at new moon, the bars are going to be much higher. Kind of like think of cell phone coverage. The more bars you have, the better it is. It's the same principle with this. The more blue bars you have, the better your Milky Way visibility core, or the core will be. The less blue bars, the worse your visibility or the decreased amount of time that you'll have access to it. So that's a really good tool as well. So the rule of 500, 400, uh, these are basic rules of thumb to kind of get you started in determining what is my best shutter speed for the lens I'm using and the focal length I've chosen. Um, the real basic general rule is that rule of 500. You're basically taking 500 divided by whatever your focal length is, and that gives you your shutter speed. Um, if you're using a crop sensor, you want to do your multiplication first. So if I'm using a 16 millimeter multiple, I know Sony is a 1.5 crop, so 1.5 times 16 is actually 24. So I take 500 divided by 24 to get my shutter speed. 500 is a basic entry place to be. 400 is a little more restrictive and probably a little bit better place to start. If you have a higher resolution camera or a longer focal length, you want to err on the side of caution. Um, but even with a rule of 400, I know for my setup, I have to go below that. So did a couple math examples because, math is fundamental and I'm not so good at math. But full frame camera, 500 by 16 millimeters, a 31-second exposure. I don't care what setup you use, you have star trailing at 31 seconds, no matter what camera you're on. So if you use the rule of 400, that gives you a much better place to start. I think it's somewhere around 23 seconds maybe. But crop sensor, we did the math, 16 times 1.5, and you have a 20-second exposure with a crop sensor camera. Again, you probably have a little bit of star trailing. So your best bet, err on the side of caution. If you don't want the star trailing, back it off just a little bit and I'll get you going. But these are general starting points for most people, just to get a feel for it and see what your lens camera combination can accomplish. So we'll jump into image stacking. Like I said, when I first started out, I was doing single exposures and just loving what I was capturing, but the noise in the background was really driving my OCD a little crazy, and I didn't want it. So I started stacking my images, um, and essentially stacking is just taking multiple images of the exact same thing back to back to back to back. Um, and so as soon as one image is done, you're shooting the next image. And this is where the intervalometer, whether it's built into your camera or if it's a remote shutter, if you can just set up your intervalometer to take the number of shots that you want at the desired time, shutter speed you want, it's real simple that way. And essentially what stacking does with the software that's out there today is it just takes all those images and will align them and stack them. And so any of the noise you get with a single image, because it's not going to match the noise in the next image, it's going to get deleted and canceled out. So this is why I say turn off your long exposure noise reduction, is because you're not going to need the dark frames to match with a single frame. By taking all these shots stacked, you're actually going to merge all that, and the software depicts any noise and moves it out from the image. So if you look at these top pictures here, single exposure on the left, and then the stacked 36 shots on the right. And you may ask, why 36 shots? Over the years, I've done some reading and looking into it, and the what I found is most people recommend 8, 16, 25, 36, and then it jumps to 72 shots. Those numbers are where you start to see improvements. So 8 shots is where you see more improvement over a single shot. 16 gives better results than 8, 25 or 16, 36, and so on. Um, 72 is overkill. I stop at 36 for all my stacking. My computer can only handle so much as it is. And so when you're stacking the images, I like the results I get with 36 shots. My software can handle it, my computer can handle it. I have stacked 72 on a couple different occasions. I don't recommend it. Um, you might as well go take a lunch break, take the dog for a walk, come back in an hour, because it does take a long time. But the difference in quality was negligible between 36 and 72. So uh, I don't do 72. I stop at 36. And then the bottom, you can see the single exposure versus a stacked exposure. You're just going to get that much more detail, that much more clarity, that much more color when you stack images versus a single. And so I would say 99% of the images I've posted so far, put out there, are stacked images. Um, I haven't done single in a long time.
Okay. Can I interrupt you for a couple of questions?
Yes, please.
It falls where you just left off. Andy's question is, do I have to follow a star for all 36 images, or will Sequator figure it out if I don't move the camera?
Sequator does all the work for you. Do not move your camera. So
Okay.
when you're stacking, you will set your camera in one position, focus it in, set up your intervalometer, and fire away. And you don't have to use an intervalometer. I've literally sat there 36 times and pressed the button over and over again when I left my intervalometer at home before I got the built-in one. Um, so yeah, you just take all your shots back to back to back, let the software do the work for you. Um, and we'll talk about Sequator here shortly, but essentially what it does is it'll take all those images, it finds a midpoint image, and it aligns all the other images to that middle point. And so it does all the heavy lift for you.
Okay. Let me sneak in one more from
Yeah.
Susan. She wants to know, do you edit each of the images you stack?
Okay. So yes and no. There's a caveat to that. I edit a single image, and all I do in the initial image is some basic color adjustments. I'll apply the lens corrections, chromatic noise aberration removal, and then I'll zoom in to 100% and look for any color noise. The Sigma, while a very good lens, does exhibit some color noise, and so I will adjust that. And depending where I'm shooting, light pollution, etc., dictates how much color noise I apply. So I make those minor adjustments, and then I'll apply them and sync it with the rest of the shots. So I sort of edit a single and then apply the edit to the rest of them, and then I export for stacking.
Okay. All right.
And it's
Thank you.
not my full yeah, it's not my full edit. That's just a baseline to go ahead and stack the images. Once I have them stacked, and then I'll actually go back and truly edit the stacked file.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so basically you're gonna take those stacked images and you're gonna use software to basically reduces noise, enhances detail and colors like we talked about, and you can see it down here, the single versus the stacked image. And when I do this, I do a lot of blue hour blending, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I really don't care what the foreground looks like in these images. I just worry about the night sky and capturing the cleanest image I can.
Okay.
Um, so Sequator is PC based. It's free, doesn't cost anything. Starry Landscape Stacker is Mac only. And last I checked, I believe it was $40, $39.99, $40 to purchase the software. Those are the two main ones that I know most people use, but Deep Sky Stacker does it, Cyril does it, and PixInsight does it as well. So those are all good options to use. But if you just want to start off with some software, Sequator is free if you just want to test it out and see how it works. So blue hour blending. So in the vein of my, I don't like noise in my shots and don't like noisy foregrounds when I shoot night photography. Several years ago, I started blue hour blending, and essentially all that is you're combining the night sky image, so your stacked image, tracked image, single exposure, whatever it is, with a shot taken during blue hour, and that can be sunrise, before sunrise or post sunset. So as you can see in this image here, I've utilized photo pills to figure out where the Milky Way is going to line with Balanced Rock and Big Ben. I've taken my blue hour shot there on the right. I've stacked my images down here on the bottom left. And then I've gone and done the edit, and there's my final image. And so if you were to zoom in on this final image, my foreground is crisp, it's detailed. Um, but again, when you're blue hour blending, it's all about the blend. And so you really need to make sure that when you blend those two together, that it's a seamless blend, the transition works, the colors match. Um, so there's a lot of work on the editing part of the blue hour blend that goes into it to make it look seamless. And it's a lot of trial and error to get to that point. Um, but the great thing about it is you're getting a lot of detail in your foreground. You can combine it with the night sky, and so you get no artifacting, no hot pixels, especially in the summertime. uh, our workshop last week, we were having issues with the heat in West Texas and Big Bend, and just having all kinds of hot pixels at night in our foreground element. And it's just, even in the sky, just nothing you can do about it. It's just so hot, and the cameras get heated up. And so by shooting that blue hour shot, you eliminate those issues. And so it's in my personal opinion, I only do blue hour blends now. I just I like the detail, the clarity. I can blow these prints up big because I do sell prints, and so I want to have that crisp detail that if I put a massive print on your wall, it's going to look crisp. Um, and again, this is just my preferred technique is blue hour blending at this point.
Can I slide a question in real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, from Valerie. Do you edit both images before Blue Hour Blend? Before you Blue Hour Blend?
So yes, I do a little bit of editing. So the way I typically do is I'll do the basic edits on my Milky Way. I'll stack it and bring it back into Lightroom. I'll do some editing, initial editing in Lightroom, sometimes of the Milky Way, and then I'll do some initial edits of the blue hour shot. And that's simply maybe raising some shadows just to show some of the detail in the dark spots, dark parts of the image. Because as you can see in that top right image, it looks pretty dark. You really can't see any detail, but by lifting the shadows a little bit, because when I shoot blue hour, I'm shooting anywhere from f8 to f16, and I shoot in aperture priority mode, ISO 100. So I let the camera dictate if I'm shooting post sunset, anywhere from a fast shutter speed up to 30 seconds, I'll shoot my blue hour shot with those parameters, f8 to f16, ISO 100, and whatever the camera dictates. And all I'm looking for post sunset is that there's no harsh light on any of my foreground elements, whether it be mountains in the background, in this case, balanced rock in my foreground. I'm just looking to make sure that there's no residual light hitting those objects, or at least very minimal. Um, and then in the case of sunrise, uh, I'm looking, or shooting sunset, I'm looking for that camera, that exposure to stay on both ways, under 30 seconds. That's your ideal spot. Anywhere in that window with those aperture settings and shooting in aperture priority mode, you're usually good to go. So I will raise my shadows. I'll do some initial basic edits to try maybe color match a little bit, but I usually bring them both into Photoshop and then make them both smart objects. And then I'll sit there and just tinker back and forth. The beauty of smart objects is that my edits aren't permanent. If I make a change and I don't like it, I can open up the smart object again, back in camera raw, and continue to tinker, and can just make micro adjustments until I'm happy with the color blend. And then we blend them together.
Because you've got the balanced rock right there,
Mhm.
Jamie's got a question. It's more logistical.
Yeah.
She wants to know, did you guys spend the night out at Balanced Rock, or did you do that hike down in the dark? Because it's quite a long hike, I believe.
It is a 1 mile hike. We did do it in the dark.
Okay.
The beauty of this location, while yes, a little bit longer hike,
Mhm.
um, the first 3/4 of a mile to the location is flat. It's just sand and a path. It's really not a big deal. The last 1/4 mile is I'd call it bouldering, but there's a definitive path and steps. And if you just take your time, it's really not bad. It's clearly marked. There's signs up there. So it's not bad. And then we hiked out at sunrise for this one.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So that is blue hour blending. We'll touch a little bit on tracking. Uh, Star trackers are a great tool. Um, we talked about single exposures versus stacked images, and stacked is better than single in terms of clarity, details, the colors that you're going to be able to capture. Tracking takes us to a whole nother level. If you have the ability to purchase a tracker, carry a tracker with you, they're a great tool. They will allow, because they compensate for the Earth's rotation, to take multiple minute long exposures. Um, so if I were to take 36 shots back to back at 10 seconds apiece, that's 360 seconds. I could take a single 360-second exposure, and the two images side by side will look completely different. The stacked image will be great, but when you compare it to a tracked image, that's a whole nother ballgame. And so the quality and the amount of information that you're getting in one long exposure blows stacking out of the water. But it's not everybody's budget. The weight of carrying some of these trackers can be a bit much. I was open with my workshop last week in that I typically don't carry my tracker with me. I have one. I have the Ioptron Sky Tracker, very similar to what's in that picture there. It's 4, 5, 6 pounds to carry the whole thing with me. If I'm backpacking in or hiking in somewhere, I'm probably not carrying the extra weight. I'll just stack. I know what I can do stacking, and with my editing that I'm happy stacking. But if you're driving somewhere and you have the ability to pack your gear and just take it out of your car and set up to shoot, absolutely take a tracker with you all day long. Um, the Skywatcher Star Adventurer, I think a couple of our guys last week had that. It's a little more cumbersome, much bigger setup, great tool. That is definitively one that if you're driving, bring it. If you're flying or having a backpack in, leave it at home. The Ioptron Star Tracker is a little bit smaller, still weighs several pounds. It takes up, crucial bag space if you're hiking in somewhere, but it is a good one and budget friendly for the most part. I think you can get them now for under 300, if I'm not mistaken. And then the newer one to the game in the last couple of years is Move, Shoot, Move Nomad. And this one is literally like a puck, like a hockey puck. I mean, it's pretty small, easy to pack in a bag, whether you're hiking, flying, whatever the case is. It's a really good one, and it's simple to set up. And so most of these are based off of Polaris. And so you use a laser to find Polaris. You focus in, and there's a certain setting. There's apps, there's Polar Star apps that you can download that will tell you on that date where you are, where Polaris should be in your reticle. And as long as you set your tracker up with Polaris in your reticle at that position, it'll track the stars for you, and counteract the Earth's rotation. Um, but Move Shoot Move makes a really good one that's fairly inexpensive and does a really good job of that. Um, and so it's good for backpackers or for a small setup. We had one of those last week and it did a really good job. So in the hierarchy of things, you have single exposure, stacked images, and then tracked. And like I said, if you can do it, afford it, want to carry the equipment with you, tracked is the way to go, especially if you're blue hour blending. It's such a higher quality sky image. So a little bit on composition. Um, I think I touched on this briefly earlier, but anytime you're out photographing, whether it's a landscape, a sunset, sunrise, you're looking to tell a story for your viewer. Like something in that image or that scene has captured your attention. And so you want to share that with people you're sharing the image with. And so what is it? Is there a leading line? Is there some story you're looking to tell? And so I always stress composition. It applies just as much in night photography as it does in daytime photography. And so here on the left, this is an image out of Big Bend, and it was a unique position that we got ourselves into back in March. That took quite a bit of some strenuous hiking to get to, but it was a vantage point that we had never seen before. And that's something I enjoy doing in my Milky Way photography is showing the viewer something that's not already out there. It's a unique perspective from a hard to get location. And so these two boulders are pretty big. They're probably 5 feet tall boulders that I've sat down in between essentially or down below, and I'm using them to create a V that kind of mimics the up and down V of the mountains in the background. And so it's kind of leading you into that scene there with the Milky Way core rising above it. And this is late March. So, we talked about February, March, the Milky Way is pretty flat coming up initially. And then later in the evening, you get a nice arch. And so this is a pretty flat Milky Way just coming over Mule Ears and Big Bend. But again, using the landscape to create a frame and a place to lead the viewer's eye through. Um, this one here in the middle, this was that North Alabama Milky Way that I got a couple months ago, back in May, and actually last month. And again, this using that foreground element, these big boulders in the rocks, is creating a little step pattern up through the rocks, through that tree, which leads you up into the Milky Way core. So it might be kind of a picture, but on location, I was seeing like a slight S curve to this. And so I'm trying to draw through the use of light painting and the natural terrain, draw the viewer's eye into where I want you to go. And so you create a path to put this photograph together. And then the same thing on the right. This is a iconic location, Death Valley National Park. This image was from quite a few years ago, back in 2017, but you can see the sailing stones that are out there. If you're not familiar, these stones are falling off the mountains in the background, and over years and years and years, the snow that happens up there, they get frozen in the mud, and then when they thaw, the wind blows and they shift. And so over decades or centuries, for all we know, they slowly move across the desert floor. And so that leading line, I've used light painting to paint those leading lines that lead back into the mountains, which just so happens to coordinate with the slope of the Milky Way. So you almost create that nice pattern back into the image of the mountains, and then it leads into the Milky Way sky. So using your foreground element and those leading lines are things that you want to accentuate in your image to tell a story. Is just some of the things that you think about when you're trying to compose your shot and set up for the night. And a lot of this is dictated by daytime scouting. Um, Scouting your location, knowing what you want to photograph, how's the Milky Way line up, where do I need to be set up with my tripod? I mean, all these things go into play when you're playing your shot. It's not simply just showing up and dropping your camera and then pointing at the sky and going, ta-da. Like there really is a lot that goes into shooting the Milky Way. And so planning is a crucial step in that.
Let me slip in a question before you go
Yeah,
off the slide.
please.
Andy wants to know, maybe it's Famika, I'm not sure, but is that the Corona Borealis in the first image?
The one from here from Big Ben,
I think that's what he's referring to.
the
Yeah.
Corona, I don't know. I'd have to do some Googling to figure that one out. Um, I'm not familiar. It very well could be. Um, I will say I'm not all knowing when it comes to astronomy and what objects are in the night sky.
Okay.
Um, but sorry, I
That's
cannot
your
answer
that's your homework. Okay. So
that.
Nydia wants to know, is Big Bend and the formation in the background, is that mule ears peaks? And I think the answer is yes.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and all right, I'm gonna endorse you right here. Um, I I see thousands of photos, mostly because I'm here in Texas and I run a couple of Texas Instagram pages. I see a lot of Big Ben pictures. I see a lot of mules and mule ear photos.
Yep.
Brandon, I've not seen this composition. So I was like,
You shouldn't have seen this composition.
yeah.
It was,
This is great.
yeah,
Ooh, this is different. So okay.
that was the goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
The workshop we had in March, the participants we had were a little quite adventurous and were willing to take a risk.
Mhm.
And we took into the spot that we had scouted previously. And it was off the beaten path, no trail. And like you said, it was a perspective that I have not seen before and wanted to capture.
Okay. All right.
So,
I think I caught everything.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
No
right.
worries. All right. Yeah. So what story are you telling? and leading the viewer's eye. Like we said, we talked about that. That's the big thing is with any night sky image, I'm hoping to tell a story and lead the viewer through the image based on how I edit and use light to paint the scene. So as far as editing software, these are the basic ones. I start off in Lightroom with everything. We use Sequator to stack. I'm a PC guy. Um, and then Photoshop. Everything gets finished out in Photoshop. Um, for focus stacking, because so if you go back to this image real quick here, the foreground, because of how close I was to these boulders, I have two shots that are focused on the left, one on the left, one's on the right, and then I have another one for the background of my foreground. And so it's actually three shots that have been focus stacked and then bringing in the Milky Way shot. So uh, in this case, I use Helicon Focus. It's another paid app that does a really good job of focus stacking. So especially if you're shooting wildflowers, like John, you're talking about doing next month, um, Helicon Focus is a great tool for focus stacking wildflowers. Photoshop has gotten much better over the years, but there are still some limitations there. And I just found better success with Helicon Focus, and those that I know that use both have preferred Helicon Focus. So Photoshop, if you already have it, you're not paying for anything else new. Helicon Focus is a paid app, and I've had this for several years now, and I can't remember what I paid for the license, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a heavy lift, and it's a great tool and does a lot of good work. So even if you're doing macro photography and you're taking all the shots for a macro shot, Helicon Focus does a really good job of stacking those images for you into one single file. So good tools. We talked about some other stacking software besides Starry Landscape and Sequator, Deep Sky Tracker, and Cyril and PixInsight. So there's plenty of tools. They all do the job. Just find out what works for you and what you're comfortable with and what you know. And like I said, they all do the job. So
Are,
that's the base editing software.
are you familiar with we okay, Andy, it might be a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are you familiar with Zareen? It is a
Mm.
macro focus stacking program. So uh, Andy was curious if you think that would work.
I am not familiar with it, and I don't know.
That's okay. That's fair.
Yeah, my only concern, or at least my thought, would be with the landscape shots because some of the stuff is very close to your lens, and some of the midground and background stuff is not so close. That's not really macro, so I don't know. Maybe the software would do a fine job. It'd be worth testing out to see. Um, it would save you from having to doing, pick up any other software. But I'd be curious. But that'd be the only thing I would think about is because I'm taking immediate foreground elements that are more macro versus adding in the midground background. I'm not sure how that would affect that particular software.
Well, Andy's going to test it and report back. Um,
Thank you.
but yeah, so I'm sorry, is Helicon,
Helicon.
is that a paid software?
Yes,
Okay.
it is paid. They give you a license.
Okay.
Um, but in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, it's totally worth the cost.
Yeah.
It's done far better than Photoshop.
Okay. All right, John Fisher, stop being cheap. Just go ahead and
If you're going out to Colorado next month, you're going to need, I would recommend it for sure.
All right. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So challenges, solutions, light pollution. That's always going to be the biggest thing, depending on where you're shooting. If you're not in a dark sky location, it's finding that balance of, how high can I push the ISO versus how long do I need my shutter speed to be, um, and how wide open can I have my lens. The shot in that picture that was taken down in Florida at the beach, and you can see the far left side of the screen. There's light pollution from the town, and then on the horizon, I got the moon rising up, and so you can see that left side of my image is just washed out in the back of the camera, and that's just again you're playing with how long of an exposure can I get versus how much ISO can I push versus where do I need my aperture to be to not blow everything out. So sometimes you're just out there tinkering and trying to find out what works best for you. But light pollution is always going to be a challenge depending on where you are. Sometimes people have in the cooler months, lens heaters and hand warmers are a great tool. I have rubber banded lens heaters to my lens or hand warmers to my lens before. They work great in the cooler temperatures to keep the equipment running nice and warm and not draining your battery entirely. But that's another one. Always have extra batteries. For some reason, the cooler temps just suck the life out of batteries, even the ones you're not using. So a good tip if you're out in the cooler temps is to stick the batteries in your pocket. Um, they'll last a little bit longer with your body heat.
Okay.
Resources. Workshops are obviously a great resource if you can afford it and want to make the investment and you have photographers that you follow, you like their work, their style, teaching methods, whatever the case may be. You learn a lot in a very short amount of time and you get to a location maybe that you've never been to before. And so you also have a glorified tour guide. And so those are always great. YouTube University, when I first started out, I knew nothing about editing, how to do any of this stuff. And so I was neck deep in YouTube and tutorials online and just trying to suck up as much as I could from other photographers. But Stellarium is a good one. Dark Sky or Dark Site Finder, Bortle Maps, all those things are kind of more planning tools that will help you in the process of figuring out where to go, what you're looking for, and locations. So those are usually the recommendations I tell people is aside from the tools, YouTube University and workshops. That's your biggest bang for your buck in a short time frame. So there's a million things on YouTube. You can get lost down the rabbit hole. Recommendation there is find someone's work you like, and if they have a YouTube channel, just kind of dig in for a little while. So that's them. This is just kind of some of the work I've done over the years. Um, I like to call it the inspiration. Like just get out and shoot. Go find your places that you want to go to and take the photograph. I mean, this country, the world is beautiful. There's so many dark sky places you can photograph. John, that this one here in the middle, that's Colorado last year, Mount Sneffels. So you need to get out that way. Um, American Basin, another good spot. But yeah, just get out and shoot. Find those dark sky spots and just go out and enjoy it. It's really cool to be out into the stars and just see what's out there and be in awe because it's worth it. And then any questions?
Yeah, there was one question in there. Let me see if I can figure out what I did with it. Okay, it's filters. Can you recommend or filters for light pollution is the question. Um,
Yep. I know there's a couple companies. Nisi makes one, and it's not Case. There's another company that makes them. I don't use them. Um, haven't used them. I usually will use editing to try and eliminate some of the light pollution issues that I get. And the beauty of blue hour blending is that if you are in certain locations, like if I go back to this one here, this middle image from Alabama, I knew during my scouting that the Milky Way is going to be in this position at a specific time. Well, I actually let the Milky Way get higher in the sky that evening to capture more sky so then I could leave the noise, the light pollution that was in the bottom of the sky part and drop it behind my foreground. So it kind of masks out some of the light pollution issues that you might have. But there's other ways of doing it with filters within editing, using radial filters and different techniques that you can actually eliminate some of the light pollution or at least mask it and have it blend better with your image. But I primarily use blue hour if light pollution might be an issue. I'll let the Milky Way get higher in the sky, and then having taken the foreground shot, like this image you see here, this Milky Way at the specific time that I screenshot, this is where it would be. I just waited for it to get a little bit higher so I can eliminate the light pollution and drag it behind the foreground. So
okay.
little editing tip.
Okay, that's good. Let's go back to your very last slide just so people can, if they want to screenshot it, they can. And then I'm going to ask you, do you have any work? Okay, so you guys just came, when I say you guys, you have
I think there's a few.
a collaborator partner that did a workshop. I think you said last week you guys were in Big Bend. What do you have coming up?
So we have another workshop coming up, astrophotography related workshop in April of 2026 out in Big Bend. It's going to be Cactus Blooms and Milky Way. It's a 3-night, 2-day workshop. We'll be based out of far-flung outdoor center in Terralingua. And then we have another one fall up in June. That one's 4 nights. Again, same place, Big Bend. Be very similar to what we just got done doing last week, just adding one additional night. And then we also have put on our calendar next October. We have a 3 night, 2 day workshop in the mountains of Colorado doing fall colors and Milky Way. So we have 3 on the books right now for next year. The April one has 6 slots. We're down to 5 now. June it has 12 slots. That's our biggest one. We already have at least one for that one, or 1 or 2 for that one. So, and then October's only 6 slots. So smaller groups.
Wonderful. Okay, let me ask you to take your screen down. You guys, you can find him at blacklion.photography. That's your website. And I'm going to assume that all those workshops are already posted there.
They are. Everything's on the under the workshop tabs.
Wonderful. All right. With that, Brandon, I'm going to say thank you. What I liked about your presentation was how concise and how there's a lot to read. Okay, I'm not a
Yeah.
big fan of reading a lot of stuff, but in this particular subject matter, somebody that's just starting, this is so helpful. They can go back, they can stop the screen, they can screenshot it, and just those bullet points. Every one of them offered something that you need to know to get the shots that you want when you're in attempting or doing dark sky photography. So I want to thank you for coming, and I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't like to put people on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot. I want you to come back,
Yeah.
and I want you to do one on landscape in the light of day, so that we have,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So give me a little bit of time to get you back on my calendar, but I wouldn't mind, honestly. This is one of those selfish plugs for myself to see maybe some of those wildflowers in Colorado.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I
Absolutely.
appreciate your time and thank you for accepting my invitation. I'm always so thrilled when people say yes, and then I don't have to cry myself to sleep when someone says no.
No, thank you so much for the invite. I do greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. All right. You guys, we are off next week, but we'll be back on July 9th when Josh Skalecki joins us to share his presentation, Learn to Incorporate Space into Your Wildlife Photography. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful, and I hope that we see you again soon.